From Continuous Creation by Ann Field, Unitarian Universalist religious educator. God is the word I use to allude to that source of wonder and mystery that I experience when I contemplate the fact of my existence. As I consider the sweep of cosmic evolution, that incredible story of inert matter giving rise to living, feeling, thinking, dreaming creatures, I have a sense of spiritual reality that is always surging onward and outward. That is the purpose that I call God, the spiritual evolution of the cosmos, creation flowing free. I have difficulty using God as a noun, for a noun must point to something, a person, place, or thing, I was once taught. To me, God is a verb. To use a metaphor of punctuation, God is not a period, but a question mark or an exclamation point. God is not the answer to the mystery of life, but the acknowledgement of the mystery. God is, in the words of Samuel Longfellow, the life that maketh all things new. When I recognize the presence of God working through me, I live with a sense of high adventure and eternal significance.
Our covenant. Take it back out. Take out that order of service and take a look at it again, because you've heard it a lot of times, very likely you have. And, maybe you haven't thought too much about it. Where did it come from? In our Unitarian Universalist tradition, that has its roots way back in the Puritan church, believe it or not, the Unitarian side of the family, anyway. That's how congregations were gathered. They weren't founded, they didn't just exist because they were, Puritan colonizers, right? And they came, and they brought their tradition to what they thought was the New World. And they gathered their congregations by creating and crafting a covenant together. And a covenant was basically a set of sacred promises that they made to each other about their purpose and their relationship with each other and with God. And so there are all kinds of different covenants dating back to the 17th century here, and I've studied many of them, and they're very similar, but they are all beautifully a reflection of the individual communities that crafted them. This covenant that we are currently using at UUCGL was, I think, chosen by Van Knight. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the previous ministers. It's a very good covenant. It is in popular usage in Unitarian Universalist congregations, but because all of our congregations are independent, congregations will take the Griswold Covenant, which was written by a man named L. Griswold, and it appeared at first in 1933, and they'll edit it, and they'll put their own little revisions in there. This congregation embraces this covenant, even though we know that individually among us, people might be making private, quiet revisions in their heads to some of the language, or they might have questions about it as they recite it. So it needs to be a living affirmation, and it needs to really belong to anybody that recites it. I wrote my doctoral thesis on the covenant tradition. and I developed a covenanting process that has been used by many UU congregations in one of my sabbatical projects, and this is my second to last Sunday in the pulpit. I will, next Sunday is my last Sunday in the pulpit for a while, is to finally get that dissertation published. Covenants are hard to get consensus on because we are all people who embrace freedom of conscience and individual input into a process, so the wordsmithing can actually go on forever, which is why when I work on covenants with congregations, I say, we hope that the result will be meaningful to everybody if perfect for nobody, or potentially perfect for nobody. Language will never suffice. So a lot of what fills in for the gaps left by language is feeling, commitment, love. And it says right there in that first sentence, love is the doctrine of this church. And service is its prayer, which I think is so lovely. Service is a form of prayer when it's done with love and compassion. And you may notice, dwelling together in peace can be very hard to do, so that's a serious commitment. And you might notice, I don't think that you will have ever noticed this, but my favorite coda is that to the end, that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. And I always say that a little bit louder because I really want it to be true, and it kind of brings out a bit of evangelical fervor in me. And sometimes I want to go, to the end, that all souls they shall grow into harmony with the divine. But of course, I wouldn't usually do that because it might be a little bit shocking. But that works for me as a personal statement of faith, that if we do our spiritual work, we really will become more peaceful, more whole, and we will become more in alignment with the thing that we name God. And I love Ann Fields' piece where she says, God is not a noun for her, but a verb. And that language is so robust and gorgeous. Let's take a look at one of the phrases that I think most confounds people when they first hear it. It says, the quest for truth is its sacrament, the church's sacrament. And some people go, what's a sacrament? A sacrament is a very serious religious concept. It is a ritual act that symbolizes a sacred reality, an outward sign of inward grace in traditional language. An example of a sacrament in the Catholic Church is communion. And baptism is a sacrament. And you will notice in sacraments there is usually a sacred object involved in the ritual. The water of baptism, the Eucharist of communion. Marriage is a sacrament in some traditions. So what is L. Griswold saying? That the quest for truth is a sacrament. It's nice poetry. But I think, because I know he must have been, Griswold Williams, by the way, was his name. I'm sorry, I didn't say that. He was placing learning, thinking, questing, an active verb to convey the effort and the practice of searching for meaning. In other words, it's not just a passive thing where you go idly, you kind of think, well, I don't know, that could be true. Maybe not. But it's a work. It is something that, in the spirit and tradition of a quest, something that could be dangerous, challenging, and often a valiant effort that will go unfinished or unfulfilled. You could die while you're still in the process. And I certainly myself expect to lay my burden down before finally achieving any real truth, because it is ever unfolding. Revelation is not sealed, is one of the tenets of our faith. But there will have been honor and joy and freedom and gratitude in the process that will have given my life so much meaning. Yesterday at the No Kings protest, when I was out with many others exercising our First Amendment right, I talked with many people. And I handed out my business card so that they could talk to me personally about some of the work we're doing to protect our immigrant neighbors through the Luce network. And several people immediately said, oh yeah, the UUs. The UUs are always out at these moments. And they were familiar with us, or they might have been UUs themselves. I saw some of the yellow shirts, the Side with Love campaign shirts. And one young woman started talking. I was talking to an elderly woman, and a young woman was sort of sitting behind her. And as I was talking to this older woman, this young woman was saying, and there are other congregations in the area. There's one in Marblehead, there's one in Salem. And she said, you can believe anything. Now, this was not the time for me to offer a correction or to get into that, because I was doing educating about a grassroots organization, and you really can't overload people with too much information, and you could also come across as a real bossy boots know-it-all, which I don't want to do, but I kind of groaned inwardly. You can believe anything is, as the kids say, not really a flex. It's not a really compelling invitation. Think about that. You know, why would I want to connect with any group of people where their selling point is that you can believe anything? I personally wouldn't, especially not now. I would tend to wonder, but do they believe anything? We need to know what we do believe, what we stand for, and to be able to articulate that more than ever. Things are far too serious. We cannot define ourselves by jokes. Oh, the Unitarian Universalists, yeah, they're the ones who have a question mark burnt on their lawn. It's just not funny. And we can't define ourselves by negations. Oh, you know, if you join with us, you don't have to believe this or that or the other. We have to be in the clarifying and the affirming business. I see you nodding, thank you. So I might say something like this: we don't have an official doctrine, and we are not a creedal tradition, but because we believe in the freedom of individual conscience, we say that love is the doctrine of our church, and that's actually very demanding. We really try to live into it, and if you join with us, we hope that you will take up that challenge. The covenant is a very serious inheritance and can always provide a guide. You can take it with you. A lot of you have it memorized. When you are in a position to talk with people about how their souls are doing, how their spirits are doing, as they are seeking, possibly, and they may not say this, but they may be seeking a community of meaning and engagement. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God. What does that mean to you? You may say, well, it doesn't mean that guy on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel with the beard and his finger pointed out to Adam. You know, that's not what I mean by with God. And that's a fine start, but what do you mean? What do you mean? You need to know, because you need to know the ground upon which you stand, and others will want to know. They're working it out too. So invite them into your process. It's never necessarily finalized. You can say, this is where I am now. Do you know what my God concept is? It's best expressed in the lyrics of John Lennon in his song, Across the Universe. Are you kind of humming it now? You know, Do Jai Guru Deva Om, nothing's gonna change. That's not the God concept, but that's the song. It's those lyrics that go, limitless, undying love, which shines around me like a million suns and calls me on and on across the universe. Limitless, undying love, which shines around me like a million, I have to take a breath, suns, and calls me on and on across the universe. And I sing that to myself sometimes. You know, it's like my touchstone. I dig into that, and I try to explain myself a little bit further by sharing that with people who want to know. Because again, if we are to form meaningful ties beyond just doing things together, that's the kind of sharing we need to do. So I might say to them, this limitless, undying love, to me, is communicated across the millennia and has been by religious and spiritual traditions that have handed down to me, to all of us, beautiful gods and goddesses and divinities, a biblical God of justice. I believe it has been incarnated by Jesus of Nazareth. I believe that it reveals itself through the whale breaching through the waters of the Atlantic Ocean, which is my earthly home. How does it reveal itself to you? And then we're going somewhere. Know your God. Know your rock, your ground of being, your holiness, your guides and guard. Know them. In the film by Paul Thomas Anderson, his brand new one that's out right now, One Battle After Another, it's a scenario that we will find very familiar where the federal government is attacking immigrant communities, and Leonardo DiCaprio is part of a revolutionary group, and it's a good film. It's kind of satirical, it's very deep, it has a lot going on, I recommend it. But the great Benicio del Toro plays a character named Sensei. He is a karate instructor, and he's also the leader and the paterfamilias of a Latino community. He runs the karate studio, but he's also protecting a large group of immigrants, many families, from detention and deportation. And he has what he describes to Leonardo DiCaprio's character as a kind of Latino Harriet Tubman situation going on. And he has this big sort of complex and compound where all of these families are living, and they have really wonderful security and great communication. When there's going to be a raid, they know in advance. And there's this scene where a raid is happening, so things are very, very fraught. It is a dangerous situation, but Sensei is so calm and grounded and centered as he oversees, and you see him rapidly moving through the building. And it's so funny because Leonardo DiCaprio's character is carrying a cell phone that's battery has died, and he's desperately trying to plug it in and get power to the cell phone while everybody's evacuating. And I don't need to explain the symbolism of that to you. But all of these men, women, and children and elders are going through this very orderly, very, very organized evacuation to safety. And Sensei also has a trio of skateboarders who are out in the streets gathering intel. It's beautifully orchestrated, and it has humor to it, although it is not a joke. Sensei is a Latino man, and he's also a practicing Zen Buddhist. In the midst of this utmost peril, he is teaching breathing to the terrified and very stoned Leo DiCaprio. Breathe, he says, and he reminds Leo's character that his people have been dealing with this for a long time. And here is an exchange of dialogue. Bobby's character, Leo DiCaprio's character, is like going, I'm so sorry I brought all this stuff to your door, but he doesn't say stuff. I'm so sorry I brought this to your door, man, I'm sorry about everything. And Sensei says, thank you, Bobby. We've been laid siege for hundreds of years. You did nothing wrong. Don't get selfish. Life, he yells at the running figure. Life. I deeply believe and genuinely affirm with all of you every week and as we live in community that we are growing into harmony with the divine. I believe that limitless, undying love that is at the heart of creation is working with us, within us, and among us, and that this force, by whatever name, is concerned with justice and the equitable, reverent sharing and celebrating of all the diversity of what we are, how we were made, and how we live. But I also believe that an appropriate response to the gift of this eternal love is to develop a daily relationship and practice of connection with it, so that we can be more grounded in it and name it in ways that are meaningful to you and evocative and inviting to those with whom we are also trying to develop relationships of trust and compassion and service and fellowship. Know your gods. Know you're holy. A very old universalist symbol going back many centuries was the anchor. For us coastal people, we ought to have an immediate sense of how important that is. May we be anchored in a love whose power we dare to affirm clearly and with a sense of invitation wherever we go. Life. Life.